Is the SR-91 Aurora just a myth? Its existence has been the subject of rumors, speculations, and conspiracy theories for ages. Interestingly, the Dark Star, a classified Aurora-type aircraft, has made an appearance in the latest Top Gun movie, and it has sparked a lot of curiosity lately. The U.S. government flat-out denies ever building a spy plane of such legendary status. Yet, whispers of this elusive recon aircraft from the 1980s just won't quiet down. Most folks are towing the government line on this one. Experts at the Aviation and Space Reference Site are pretty convinced there's zero solid proof of Aurora's existence. They chalk up any evidence of the spy plane to pure guesswork. For fanboys, by fanboys. Yet despite many of us dismissing it as a figment of our imagination, there's this nagging feeling. There's more to it than meets the eye. There could be some truth hidden behind all the rumors, pointing to something more real than we're being led to believe. For decades, the U.S. Air Force and CIA secretly developed aircraft that would only emerge from the shadows years later. Initially, some of these were just UFOs, stupefying observers, until the government eventually stripped away their top-secret labels. What linked these projects was their revolutionary approach to aviation technology, albeit always with military and defensive purposes in mind. These initiatives are known as black projects. They include prototypes that sometimes evolved into production aircraft, serving not just the U.S. Air Force, but also the CIA. The primary goal was to maintain an ironclad level of secrecy around cutting-edge military technologies and strategies. This secrecy was a requirement for national security and to maintain a technological edge over the Soviets and other potential adversaries. Funding for these secretive projects came from what is known as the black budget, a part of the government's financial allocation that is earmarked for classified or top-secret activities. Black projects gained significant traction during the Cold War era. The projects from this period focused on developing advanced aircraft weapon systems and surveillance methods that could be deployed stealthily without alerting the enemy. Of course, to keep one step ahead, the U.S. had to keep tabs on the Soviets. Since Soviet military sites were protected by a vast network of radar stations and missile sites, the U.S. needed a recon plane untouchable by those. So in 1956, the first aircraft from the Black Project was introduced, Lockheed's U-2 Dragon Lady. It wasn't fast, but it flew at 70,000 feet, well above Soviet air defenses, or so the U.S. thought. The Soviets had been tracking the U-2 from its first flight, and with continuous missile development and persistence, eventually shot one down in 1960. The pilot was captured, and the Dragon Lady's happy days were over. Lockheed was tasked with developing another Black Project aircraft, resulting in the A-12 and later on, its longest-serving variant, the SR-71, otherwise known as the Blackbird. Although the development and testing of the Blackbird were conducted under high secrecy, the plane's existence was revealed to the public by President Lyndon B. Johnson shortly after its first test flight, which took place on December 22, 1964. Note that this relatively quick public reveal is unusual for such a highly classified military project, but pundits believe it was likely a strategic decision during the Cold War to showcase America's technological advancements and maybe intimidate the Soviets. The SR-71 Blackbird was designed to be capable of cruising at Mach 3.2, well over 3 times the speed of sound. Granted, MiG-25s could achieve Mach 3 speeds, but they could only do it for a few minutes at a time. The Blackbird could sustain its Mach 3.2 speeds for hours on end and at much higher altitudes as well, up to 85,000 feet. It could almost touch the edge of space. The Blackbird's unique design included innovative engines that allowed it to outrun and outclimb any Soviet interceptor. And because its exterior could heat up to above 500 Fahrenheit whenever it cruised at Mach 3.2 speeds, it couldn't use run-of-the-mill aluminum like the Dragon Lady. Instead, Lockheed chose titanium for its superior strength-to-weight ratio and its ability to withstand much higher temperatures. The Blackbird's missions were of utmost importance, flying along Soviet borders to gather intelligence without crossing into enemy airspace. Despite attempts by the Soviets to intercept it, including with MiG-25s, the Blackbird's speed, endurance, and altitude kept it safe. By the 1980s, advancements in Soviet technology, including the newer MiG-31 and better missiles, posed a more significant threat. But the Soviets were the least of the SR-71's problems. Its biggest issues were its high costs, high operational demands, more advanced emerging tech like spy satellites, and politics. After serving for over 3 decades, it had to be retired. Sadly for most of us, the USAF has been keeping all subsequent black projects under wraps. But even when official details are scant due to the project's highly secretive nature, we know a few things. For one, the Aurora could reach Mach 5+, making it faster than 5 times the speed of sound. To put that in perspective, if the Aurora and Blackbird were to race from California to Maine, the Aurora could make the trip in roughly half the time it would take the Blackbird, leaving the Aurora waiting over half an hour for its predecessor's arrival. Behind its supposed speed is its advanced propulsion technology, potentially involving innovative systems like pulse detonation engines, or PDES, that utilize a series of controlled explosions or detonations within their combustion chambers. Each detonation generates a shock wave that, when expelled out the back, produces thrust. This method is potentially more efficient at higher speeds and could theoretically propel an aircraft like the Aurora to hypersonic velocities, surpassing Mach 5 with ease. In contrast, the SR-71 Blackbird utilized a more conventional type of engine known as turbo ramjets with afterburners, which, although effective for its time, was less efficient at hypersonic speeds compared to what PDEs could achieve. Sure, much of the technical speculations surrounding the SR-91 are based on deductions and informal leaks rather than official acknowledgments, but there's something about it that continues to captivate military tech enthusiasts and those in aviation circles. In the secretive world of defense spending, where billions of taxpayer dollars shuffle around, mostly out of the public eye, there was this budget entry that made people sit up and take notice. A curious line item labeled Aurora. The Defense Department's fiscal year 1986 budget documents were uncovered by Aviation Week in Space Technology. There was an entry in those documents under Strategic Reconnaissance. The project named Aurora wasn't just hanging out in the budget. It had some serious cash behind it. $80.1 million allocated for 1986. But it's the jaw-dropping $2.3 billion set for 1987 that really turned heads. That kind of funding suggested that Project Aurora was way more than a typical research gig. Ben Rich was at a symposium talking about pushing boundaries into hypersonic speeds, which for anyone outside of an aerospace lab sounded like pure science fiction. He discussed Lockheed's deep dive into hypersonic initiatives, revealing plans for a high-altitude aircraft that could blitz through the skies at Mach 5. He hinted at a new propulsion tech, a dual-flow inlet turbo ramjet that could switch from kerosene to liquefied methane as it accelerated past Mach 4. Meanwhile, major publications like the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, and Popular Science were catching wind of these sky-high aspirations. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, these outlets were dotted with articles that pieced together whispers and rumors of aircraft that could fly at speeds and altitudes that would make the SR-71 Blackbird look downright pedestrian. Each report added more fuel to the speculative fire that something revolutionary was on the horizon. And then there were reports of sightings. Back in 1989, on a seemingly ordinary day atop the Galveston Key oil rig in the chilly waters of the North Sea just east of Britain, a guy named Chris Gibson stumbled upon an extraordinary sight. This guy wasn't just any observer. He was a seasoned vet with the Royal Observer Corps. a British civil defense organization dedicated to spotting, identifying, and cataloging aircraft, and that's what Chris had been doing for over 12 years. On that day, what he saw was anything but ordinary. An aircraft shaped like an isosceles triangle slicing through the sky. It didn't look like any of the aircraft he had ever seen, and that peculiar aircraft wasn't alone. It was in the midst of refueling from a Boeing-made KC-135 Stratotanker. The mysterious triangle airplane was flanked by a pair of F-111 Aardvark fighter bombers, serving as its escort through the vast, open skies. Gibson watched intently as this enigmatic group performed their aerial dance, lingering within his view just long enough to etch a vivid image in his mind. Before they slipped away into the vastness, Gibson managed to sketch the scene, capturing a moment that felt like it was pulled from the pages of a sci-fi novel. He kept these drawings private until he decided to share them with Jane's Defense Weekly 3 years later. In 1990, Aviation Week and Space Technology dropped a bombshell about a high-altitude flyer that streaked across the night sky at breakneck speeds, often seen as just a flickering, pulsating light. Things got even more intriguing in 1991 with reports of weird sonic booms cutting through Southern California. These unusual booms hinted at a small, mysterious craft zipping through the skies at speeds between Mach 4 and Mach 5.2, way up at 90,000 feet. In 1992, the skies over the British Isles had become a stage for numerous similar sightings, the majority of which were clustered over Scotland and England. There were whispers that the mysterious aircraft was flying out of RAF Machrihanish on Scotland's rugged Kintyre Peninsula. Locals didn't just catch glimpses of something that looked eerily like the fabled Aurora, they also heard it. Its unusually loud sonic booms shattered the usual calm, punctuating the air with deep, resounding echoes. The British government seemed just as puzzled and conducted inquiries that hinted they weren't in the loop either. That same year, British Defense Secretary Tom King openly admitted to having no official knowledge of such covert operations, yet he conceded it wouldn't exactly shock the powers that be at the Air Staff and Defense Intelligence Staff if it turned out to be true. In the crisp autumn of 1993, Royal Air Force Group Captain Tom Eales saw a similar aircraft fly right over his home near the U.S. Air Force's Mildenhall base in Suffolk. The aircraft made a distinctive pulsing noise, unlike any engine he'd encountered before. Its lights flickered away towards Mildenhall, leaving more questions than answers. When Eales pushed for info the next day, a senior RAF officer didn't just shrug him off. He was blunt. Stop digging. But everything wasn't going well with these triangular aircraft. Weeks before Tom Eales saw one, an unmarked U.S. aircraft made an unexpected landing, only to be quickly concealed and removed by a Lockheed C-5 Galaxy transport. The following year added more fuel to the fire of conspiracy when a mysterious crash occurred at the Boscombe Down RAF base, which is known for testing military aircraft. The crash drew a large response from both U.S. military aircraft and British Special Air Service personnel, and the base was shut down temporarily. Although it was later suggested that the crash involved a malfunctioning towed missile decoy, this explanation did little to curb speculation about the Aurora project. The intrigue deepened with reports in The Independent, citing Air Forces Monthly about that top-secret hypersonic American spy plane that crashed. Somehow, it was linked to earlier reports of unexplained sonic booms over the Netherlands in 1992. There were also radio transmissions intercepted from an aircraft, descending from altitudes of 65,000 feet, heights not typically achieved by any known aircraft, except the U-2 spy plane or the Blackbird. These mysterious occurrences suggested that the Aurora had an involvement in high-altitude, high-speed operations across Europe. In March 1992, near Amarillo, Texas, Stephen Douglas, an investigative journalist with a knack for uncovering military secrets, captured something truly intriguing, a donuts on a rope contrail. But it wasn't just the sight that caught his attention. Douglas also noted an odd, deep, pulsating roar, think rocket engine, but with a rhythm that shook windows and rattled the house. He described it as a strange, loud, pulsating roar that felt weird and otherworldly. He also intercepted some curious radio chatter between an AWACS aircraft, call sign Dragnet 51, and two mysterious planes dubbed Dark Star November and Dark Star Mike. These call signs didn't fit the usual Dark Star operations, adding to the puzzle. Here's a clip of the Dark Star radio communication recorded by Stephen Douglas and Douglas's comments on it.
Dark Star Sierra Formation Crew.
Dark Star Sierra Formation.
Be advised for that. Dark Star Sierra, out.
A month later, on April 5th and 22nd, 6 a.m. Pacific, Douglas picked up an intriguing series of radio transmissions between Edwards Air Force Base and a high-altitude aircraft with the call sign Gas Pipe. These transmissions were unusually precise, echoing the kind of instructions one would hear for a space shuttle's re-entry. Imagine hearing, "You're at 67,000 feet, 81 miles out," and 70 miles out, 36,000, above glide slope. The details were so specific that Douglas and his team were convinced the recordings were genuine. Interestingly, there were no records of any U-2s or SR-91s flying around at that time, and Edwards had no trace of an aircraft called Gas Pipe. This sparked speculation about a new kind of space plane or an advanced project, hinting at something like the rumored Black Star, a two-stage-to-orbit vehicle with a mysterious space plane known as the XOV, carried by an XB-70-like aircraft. Despite chasing this lead for years, concrete proof remained elusive, but the whispers about cutting-edge technology kept coming. Despite all the effort, from night vision gear to late-night desert stakeouts, Groom Lake continued to be shrouded in secrecy, leaving tantalizing clues and more half-truths. In August of the same year, Bill Sweetman from the well-known Jane's Defense Weekly spilled some more intriguing info.
Very high-speed targets on the radar screens. That it was a classified program, that they weren't to panic and they weren't to report it to anybody else. The next piece of information, and the one that I think really started me investigating the Aurora story, was a sequence of sonic booms over California. If you're looking at an aircraft that is designed to fly at what's loosely called hypersonic speeds, that's 5 or 6 times the speed of sound or upwards, there are several things that become absolutely essential. One is that you require a very high degree of sweepback on the wing leading edges. Otherwise, you start getting into severe problems of drag and aerodynamic heating. As you go into this very slender shape, you still need to have a lot of volume in that shape for fuel, for propulsion, for crew. And the best way to provide that is to blend the wing and the body together. You get a very characteristic, highly blended triangular shape, which is, in plan view, identical to what Chris saw.
Turns out, seismologists had been picking up on some mysterious tremors in Southern California, right on cue every Thursday morning around 7 a.m., which lined up with the kind of ruckus you'd expect from a sonic boom high overhead. And while those booms were shaking up the regular Thursday schedule, Steve Douglas was catching some offbeat radio chatter on totally different days. Jim Morey, a seismologist at the United States Geological Survey at Caltech, noted that whatever was zooming through the sky was booking it at speeds that just didn't match anything on the books. Could it be a secret test flight out of the infamous Area 51? Here's a clip of Jim Morey's interview.
We actually have quite a few sonic booms in Southern California. One of the reasons is that the space shuttle lands at Edwards Air Force Base, which is in the desert here. It's possible to tell the direction, the speed, and the height of the object that's producing the sonic boom if you have good instrumental recording. So for these mystery booms that we saw, it's clear that they are flying offshore. Because we don't have any stations there, we don't have very much data, so we really couldn't get an accurate estimate of how fast that particular object was traveling. All we could really say is it was traveling faster than the speed of sound. And one other possibility is that it could be a meteorite, and there are instances of meteorites producing similar booms. Obviously, though, a meteorite happening every Thursday morning seems a little unlikely.
Meanwhile, the folks over at Aviation Week and Space Technology were buzzing about an aircraft they spotted that didn't quite fit the mold. This thing had diamond-shaped lights and was seen flying with two F-117 Nighthawks and a KC-135 refueling tanker not too far from Beale Air Force Base up in Northern California. After it got into formation, it switched off its lights and started making a noise like air rushing through a big tube. Beale might be a good stretch north of the San Gabriel Valley, close to LA, but it's a mere 320 miles from Groom Lake. At Mach 5, that's barely a 5-minute flight. Speaking of Groom Lake, which a lot of you probably know as Area 51, an enthusiast named Chuck Clark claimed he managed to film Aurora's takeoff from Groom Lake, though he's kept that footage under wraps. Every time something that looked or sounded similar was spotted or heard, the Aurora mystery grew thicker, leaving people with more questions than answers. Ben Rich, the former head of Lockheed Skunk Works, stated in his 1994 book, titled Skunk Works, A Personal Memoir of My Years at Lockheed, that Aurora was just a code name for something else. Quote, "The funding for the competition came out of a secret stash in the Air Force budget. A young colonel working in the Air Force Black Program Office at the Pentagon named Buzz Carpenter arbitrarily assigned the funding the code name Aurora. Somehow this name leaked out during congressional appropriations hearings. The media picked up the Aurora item in the budget, and the rumor surfaced that it was a top-secret project assigned to the Skunk Works to build America's first hypersonic airplane. That story persists to this day, even though Aurora was the code name for the B-2 competition funding. Although I expect few in the media to believe me, there is no code name for the hypersonic plane because it simply does not exist." End quote. It sounds convincing. The guy has credibility and a reputation. So whenever anyone wants to debunk the legend of the Aurora, they use this quote as their go-to. But the timeline doesn't quite add up. The Advanced Technology Bomber Competition, which ultimately resulted in the B-2 Spirit, began much earlier, September 1980. By October 1981, Northrop had already won the contract, concluding the competition years before the 1985 document was even drafted. There's no way that budget estimate from 1985 could have been intended for the competition. It begs the question, if the Aurora line item wasn't funding the Advanced Technology Bomber Competition, what was it covering? In the end, the SR-91 Aurora aircraft had to be real. It had a real budget with real technological developments, and there's no way those reported sightings were lies. But what are your thoughts? Sound off in the comments below.